Hi everyone, welcome to this video demonstrating the plot feature in Seequill. This is a revolutionary new feature that will take story organization, character tracking, and plotting to the next level. So let's get started. We're working on a story right here. It's called The Bank Heist. It's an exciting story and it features three characters that we'll be paying attention to. They are Ella, Lily, and Victoria. And these three women are going to be robbing a bank in this story. And some locations that we're going to focus on will be the bank, the hideout, and the warehouse. So here we are in the Seequill story view, and you'll notice at the bottom left there is a plot tab. So when we click on that, that will expand out the plot section, and we can create a new plot. Now when you click create a new plot, Seequill will generate a plot and it will give it a name for you. If you want to change the name, you can click the edit plot button and you can change the name. We're going to leave it as plot 1 for now. And we're going to click on the plot. So what you see here is the plot grid. And in the plot grid, there are these slots that you can take a couple of actions on. You can bring in a new scene or you can bring in an existing scene. We're going to click existing scene. And Seequill is going to prompt you to drag in a scene from your story into the plot grid. So when you drag in a scene, you'll notice that an available slot will let you drop the scene into that slot. And we can go ahead and drag in a couple of more scenes. So it's important to know that the plot grid is really what you want it to be as far as placing your scenes in these slots. You can sort your scenes in a linear fashion, for example, in a top-down approach where time flows downwards. So first this scene happens, and then this scene happens, and this scene happens. It can line up with how scenes play out in your story when the reader reads them, or it can be completely reversed and scattered and sorted all over the place. It's really up to you. So for example, we have these scenes here. Lily builds her team and Victoria breaks up with Jag. And maybe when the reader reads them, this scene happens and then the reader reads this scene. But maybe in terms of the story's time, these scenes happen at the same time. And it might make sense for you as the writer just to organize these stories in the plot to put them next to each other to indicate simultaneity, that these scenes actually happen at around the same time. And maybe that will help you as the writer plan out how your story is actually playing out. As mentioned before, one of the actions that you can take in the plot grid is create a new scene. And this is really useful for if you're not quite sure how to construct your story, if you don't really have all the pieces together, but you know you have a scene that you think you want to start writing on, the plot grid is perfect for that. You can click New Scene, and a new scene is created in the plot grid. Now what happens behind the scenes is Seequill stores these new scenes in the holding tank. So if I create another new scene here, you'll notice that scene 12 is now in the holding tank. Now these scene tiles aren't just for dragging around and dropping, you can actually work with them. So if you click a scene tile, you can take three actions. You can edit the scene, details. So for example, you can change the scene's name. You can remove the scene from the plot grid itself, or you can actually work on the scene's text right here in the plot grid. So we're going to edit the scene's text, and we're going to just start writing. To save your changes, you can just click Save, and when you're done writing, you can click Close. If you want to edit the scene's details, you just have to click the Edit Scene Details button. And we can go ahead and rename the scene if we want. And if you want to remove a scene from the plot grid, you can just click the Remove from Plot button. This does not remove the scene from the story itself. You'll notice that our scene is still here in the holding tank. It just removed it from the plot grid. Now, moving these scenes around in the plot grid is a lot of fun, but it's not completely useful, and Seequill lets you take it one step further. You can connect scenes to each other using these connector endpoints. So for example, let's say I want to tie in all the scenes that Ella is involved in. So I've got a scene here where Ella gets yelled at by her boss. I've got a scene here where Lily tries to convince Ella of something. And if I want to establish that kind of connection, I can use these connector endpoints by moving the mouse over the endpoint and then clicking and dragging a connector to another scene. And now these two scenes are connected. So if I move these scenes around, you'll notice that the connector follows them and maintains that connection, so that as the story writer, I know that these two scenes are related to each other somehow. So for example, this is a Victoria scene and this is a Victoria scene, so maybe I want to relate them together. And so we've got these Ella scenes connected, we've got these Victoria scenes connected, and very quickly you can see visually how your scenes are connected to each other and related to each other. If you want to modify an existing connection, all you have to do is click on the connection. And let's say you wanted to get rid of it, well, you can just click Delete Connection at the top. If you want to move a connection, you can just click on the connection and then just drag the endpoints to where you want to move the connection to. And you can even move the connection to a completely different scene if you want to. So these connections are cool, but they don't really establish a lot of context, and that's where plot lines come in. So to demonstrate plot lines, I'm just going to get rid of this connection, and I'm going to expand the plot tab again, and you'll notice this add icon. And this add icon allows you to add a plot line to your plot grid. When you click on the plot line, you got to give it a name, and the plot line really is whatever contextual connection you want to exist in your plot. So for example, this might be a plot-driven plot line, so maybe I want to establish a plot line for all the scenes related to Lily building up the team for the bank heist. So we can call this Heist Team Building. And I can give it a color, so we'll give it a blue color. And now when I select this plot line, I can connect two scenes together, and you'll notice that the connection is now of that color. And this gives a really immediate visual indication that not only are these two scenes connected, but as the writer I know that these two scenes are connected with this particular plot line in mind. If I wanted another connection, for example, let's say I wanted to track all the scenes that were in Victoria's POV, I can make a Victoria's POV plotline, and let's make this one red. And this scene is a Victoria scene, this scene is a Victoria scene, and maybe I know that they're written in Victoria's POV. I can click on Victoria POV and connect those scenes. And so you can see very quickly there is a solid visual representation of how scenes are connected and the context in which they're connected as well. If you want to modify a plot line, it's just like modifying a regular connector. You just click on the connection and you notice this drop-down will show up. And this drop-down allows you to select a different plot line or create a new plot line. So for example, maybe instead of the heist team building plot line, I actually want to track Ella's POV. So I can do an Ella POV. Let's say I want that to be green. You can deselect any plot lines that you don't want associated with that connection and then select another plot line instead. And now that connection is green, indicating that it is Ella's POV. If a connection deals with multiple plot lines, for example, let's say I want this connection to represent both the heist team building and Ella's POV, you'll notice that the connection is now a thicker dark gray color. And if you want to review any connection like this, you can just click on it and see the multiple plot lines that are associated with it. Seequill's plot grid also lets you track characters through your story. Now to demonstrate that, we're going to tag some characters into our scenes. I'm going to go and edit this scene here where Ella gets yelled at by her boss. I'm going to say add characters, and I'm going to add Ella to this scene. Now, I hope you notice something. You'll notice that Ella's tile shows up in this scene, and it's very easy to see that Ella is in this scene. Over here, Lily's trying to convince Ella. Let's go ahead and add both of them to this scene, Ella and Lily. Save. And you can see both Ella and Lily are in this scene. Let's go ahead and fill out the rest too. Okay, so now in our plot we've got 5 scenes and we're tracking Victoria, Ella, and Lily. Now, if you have a much more complex plot grid, you might want to actually know where your characters are and what scenes your characters show up in. And that's where the Track Characters feature comes into play. So if you click Track Characters, let's say we want to track where Ella is. Just click Ella and say OK. And you'll notice that only the scenes where Ella appears in are highlighted and displayed, and the other ones are darkened out. So very quickly you can see what scenes Ella appears in. If you want to track more than one character, let's say we want to track Ella and Victoria, you can select multiple characters and then click OK. And now the scenes where Ella or Victoria are in your story will be highlighted. This scene only contains Lily, and that's why it's grayed out. To clear the tracked characters, you can just click this X button right here. One other really cool thing that Seequill allows you to do is establish locations for your scenes and even place characters in those locations, and that really shines here in the plot grid. So for example, this scene here, Lily builds her team, that happens at the hideout because Lily's in the hideout planning the entire bank heist. So let's go ahead and put Lily in the hideout. And we'll click Save. And you'll notice that the background image of this scene is now the hideout because the scene takes place in the hideout. And so you get, as a writer, you get the immediate feedback that this scene takes place in the hideout and Lily is in the hideout. Over in this scene here, Victoria does recon work. Maybe she's doing recon work. She would probably be doing it at the bank. So let's go ahead and put Victoria in the bank. And you'll notice that the background image for this scene tile is the bank. So as a writer, once again, you see very clearly where your characters are and what locations your scene takes place in. And you can use that for timing, placement, organization to make sure that your reader, when they read your story, the scenes actually play out in a sensible way. This also comes into play when you're tracking characters as well. So for example here, Lily tries to convince Ella. Maybe Lily and Ella are actually in 2 different locations for this scene. Let's go ahead and put Lily in the hideout, and we'll put Ella in the warehouse. Now you'll notice that in this particular case, because Lily is in the hideout and Ella is in the warehouse, the background tile is not going to show an image because the scene belongs to multiple locations really. But if you went to Track Characters, you can click Track Characters, and let's say you want to track Ella. Well, now we're tracking Ella, but you'll also notice that the scene tile background has changed to the warehouse because that's where Ella is, and we're tracking Ella. If instead we want to track Lily, you'll notice that the scene background changes to the hideout because Lily is in the hideout and we're tracking Lily. So hopefully this shows how you can really get a feel of where your characters are in your story, and you can decide if a scene is too close to another scene and a character moves from one location to another. Maybe if that happens too quickly and there's no realistic way that the character could travel that fast, and you want to make sure that the pace of your story plays out correctly, Seequill's plot grid can really help with that. We hope you are really going to find the plot grid super useful, and we hope it plays a big part in your story organization and helps you write incredible stories. Thanks for watching, and thank you for using Seequill. Have fun.